The crowd at JFK Airport was a blur of rolling suitcases, boarding calls, and quick goodbyes. A place where stories ended and began in the same breath. Among them stood a little girl of 8, clutching a pink backpack and a folded drawing in her small hand. Her eyes, the color of late autumn leaves, were fixed on the tall man kneeling in front of her. "Listen, Mia," the man said softly, his voice breaking just enough to betray the smile he tried to keep. "I just need to go for a while, okay? Daddy's got to fix some things. But I'll come back. I promise." Her fingers gripped the sleeve of his gray coat like it was a lifeline. "How long?" she whispered. He hesitated. "Not long. Just until spring." She nodded, not really understanding time, only knowing that spring felt far away. As the boarding announcement echoed overhead, the man stood and placed a small silver locket around her neck. "When you miss me, hold this. It means I'm thinking of you too." Mia's mother stood a few feet away, sunglasses hiding tears that had been falling for weeks. Their marriage had already ended in silence long before this flight, but the little girl didn't know that. To her, this wasn't goodbye. It was just "see you later." Her father walked away through the crowd, glancing back once. Just once. Then he was gone. Minutes later, the overhead voice called for the next boarding group. Mia didn't move. She sat by the window in front of Gate 23, watching the planes climb into the sky, tracing each one with her eyes. A flight attendant approached, kneeling beside her. "Sweetheart, are you waiting for someone?" Mia nodded. "He said he'll come back." The woman smiled sadly. "I'm sure he will." But hours passed. Then night came. The airport emptied. Her mother tried to lift her from the seat, whispering, "Mia, it's time to go home." But Mia didn't move. She kept staring through the glass, whispering the same words over and over, like a prayer carved into the air. "He'll come back," he promised. And somewhere above the city, a plane disappeared into a storm, carrying a man who never made it home. 10 years later, the same terminal at JFK looked different, brighter, faster, more modern. But to Mia Parker, it still carried the same echo of that night. She was 18 now, her pink backpack long replaced by a worn leather messenger bag. But the silver locket still hung around her neck, the chain slightly tarnished from years of wear. She touched it often, especially on days when the departures board flickered the way it had when her father disappeared. She worked part-time at Café Horizon, a small coffee stall just past Gate 23, the very place where she'd last seen him. Most people thought it was just coincidence that she'd taken the job. Only Mia knew the truth. She'd applied there because she couldn't leave that gate behind. It was the last place she'd felt safe, the last place she'd believed in promises. Every morning, she watched flights take off while serving travelers who never noticed her. Families reunited, couples argued, children laughed. All the life she'd missed played out around her, but never for her. Sometimes she'd find herself staring at faces coming off long international flights, looking for a man with tired blue eyes and a gray coat. But none of them ever stopped. The rumors about her father varied. Some said he'd died in the crash over the Atlantic that winter. Others whispered he'd survived but vanished, too ashamed to come back after losing everything. Her mother eventually stopped talking about him altogether, moving to Chicago and starting over. But Mia couldn't. She stayed. Still watching the planes? Her coworker, Jason, teased one afternoon, wiping the counter beside her. Mia smiled faintly. "Old habit. You know, most people get bored after a week working here. You've been at this for 3 years. Guess I'm just stubborn," she said, eyes fixed on a departing flight. "Besides, this place reminds me that people do come back sometimes." Jason didn't argue. He'd learned that when Mia said something like that, It wasn't small talk. It was memory. That night, after closing, she lingered at gate 23. The janitor had dimmed the lights, leaving only the soft hum of machines and the quiet whisper of air vents. She sat in the same chair where she'd waited as a child, her reflection faint in the glass. Outside, planes taxied slowly in the rain. From her bag, she pulled out the drawing she'd kept folded for a decade, the one she'd made for her dad before that flight. The paper was creased and fragile, but the crayon lines were still bright. A stick-figure man holding hands with a little girl under a yellow sun. At the top, in a child's uneven handwriting, were the words, "Me and Daddy, forever." She traced the letters with her thumb and whispered, "You said you'd come back." Her phone buzzed, jolting her from the thought. A number she didn't recognize flashed on the screen. "Hello?" she answered quietly. "Mia Parker?" The voice on the other end was male, low, uncertain. "This is Officer Randall from the NYPD. I think we may have found something that belongs to you." Her heart skipped. "To me?" "Yes, it's about your father." Mia froze. The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath her. She stood, gripping the edge of the chair for balance. "What about him?" "We can't discuss much over the phone," the officer said, "but we'd like you to come to the station tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Bring some form of ID. The call ended before she could ask more. For a long time, Mia just stood there, the dial tone humming in her ear. Then she sank slowly back into the seat, eyes locked on the rain-streaked runway. The locket around her neck felt heavier than ever. She unclasped it for the first time in years, opening the tiny compartment. Inside was a faded photo, her as a baby in her father's arms, both smiling at the camera. The hinge was rusted now, but the picture was still clear enough to remind her that once she had been loved. "Tomorrow," she whispered to the window, her voice trembling. "Tomorrow I'll finally know." But as she turned to leave, a shadow moved across the glass outside, the faint reflection of a man in a gray coat, standing near the arrival's exit, watching her before disappearing into the crowd. The next morning, New York was wrapped in gray clouds, the kind that turned everything slower and quieter. Mia barely slept. She replayed that phone call in her head all night. "We found something that belongs to you." She couldn't tell if it meant hope or heartbreak. She arrived at the Midtown precinct early, clutching her locket like a talisman. The officer who'd called, Detective Randall, was waiting in a glass office with a file open on his desk. He stood when she entered, offering a polite but cautious nod. "Mia Parker?" "Yes," she said, her voice small. "Please sit." She lowered herself into the chair, eyes darting to the file. It was thick, too thick for a simple update. Randall noticed her glance. "I understand this might be difficult," he began, "but we've reopened your father's case." Mia's stomach twisted. "Why now? It's been 10 years. He folded his hands. "Because last month, the Coast Guard recovered a piece of wreckage near the coast of Portugal, part of Flight 417. Your father's name was still on the passenger manifest, but DNA evidence shows he wasn't on board." Mia blinked, stunned. "What do you mean?" "I mean he didn't die in that crash." The words hit her like a storm. "You're saying my father's alive?" Randall hesitated. "We don't know that for sure, but we do know he left the flight before takeoff. Security footage shows him walking out of JFK less than an hour before departure. After that, nothing. He vanished." Mia sat frozen, memories flooding back. His calm face at the gate, the locket, his promise. "He told me he'd come back," she whispered. Randall leaned forward. "Did he ever contact you? Send letters? Messages?" She shook her head. "Nothing. I thought he was dead." He nodded slowly. We did too. But last week, a security camera near the airport picked up a man who looks just like him. Same build, same scar on the left eyebrow. He was seen at gate 23. Mia's breath caught. That's my gate. Randall watched her carefully. That's why I called you. If he's alive, he's staying close to somewhere familiar. Maybe to you. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the fluorescent light above them. Mia's heart raced. If he's alive, why didn't he come home? Randall didn't answer right away. People disappear for many reasons. Debt, guilt, protection. Sometimes the truth isn't something they think their family can forgive. Mia swallowed hard. I would have forgiven him, she said quietly. The detective studied her face. Young, hopeful, trembling. Then he slid a small envelope across the desk. This was found near the wreckage site. It's water damaged, but the name inside matches yours. Mia picked it up with shaking hands and unfolded the paper. The writing was faint but legible, written in her father's familiar looping script. Mia, if you ever read this, I couldn't stay. I had to make sure you'd be safe. When the time is right, I'll find my way back. Trust the locket. Her eyes filled with tears. He's alive, she breathed. Randall nodded. If he is, he's been watching. Maybe even closer than you think. When Mia left the station, the wind had picked up. The city felt sharper, the air colder. She took the subway back toward JFK, her thoughts a blur. The locket felt like it was burning against her skin. Trust the locket, he'd written. But what did that mean? By the time she reached the terminal, the late afternoon light was pouring through the glass roof, turning everything gold. She walked to gate 23, the same gate where everything had started, and stopped dead. There, on the floor by the window, lay a folded paper airplane. Childlike, simple, and impossibly familiar. On its wing, in black ink, were 2 words. I'm here. Mia's hands trembled as she bent to pick it up. She looked around, the crowd thick, faces rushing by, but no one looked back. Then, in the reflection of the window, she saw him. A man standing a few rows behind her. Older now, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes unmistakable. Her father. For a moment, neither of them moved. 10 years of silence hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Mia's breath hitched. Her heart screamed to run, to throw herself into his arms. But her feet stayed still. He smiled faintly, just as the announcement echoed overhead. Final boarding for Flight 417 to Lisbon. The same flight number, the same gate. And as he turned toward it, disappearing into the crowd once more, Mia whispered. Not with anger, but with trembling belief. He came back. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a truth far more complicated than she'd ever imagined. The crowd at gate 23 blurred into motion. But to Mia, the entire world had narrowed to one impossible truth. Her father was alive. He wasn't a ghost, not a memory, but flesh and breath moving through the same air she was. Her throat locked as she tried to push through the tide of passengers. By the time she reached the gate's security rope, he was gone. Only the boarding door sliding shut remained. She pressed her hand to the glass, watching the plane pull back. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw him glance through one of the small oval windows, eyes finding hers the way they used to. The old ache came flooding back. Then the jet angled toward the runway, swallowed by distance and sunlight. The next hours blurred. She rode the train home without remembering the stops. The letter and paper airplane clenched so tightly in her palm they left red marks. She wasn't sure if she was shaking from shock or anger. He was here. He saw me. And he left again. That night, the city lights glittered through her apartment window like distant constellations. She sat at her small kitchen table, the locket open beside a cup of untouched tea. The tiny photo inside caught the light and flickered, almost like a signal. She turned it over for the first time and gasped. Etched faintly on the metal backing were numbers, 41.39 to 70.02 a.m. Coordinates, and a time. Her pulse quickened. She opened her laptop, typed the numbers into a map search, and watched the screen zoom to a location just outside JFK. An abandoned hangar near the old cargo wing, long shut down after the airline merger years ago. The same area where the surveillance camera had caught him days earlier. She looked at the clock. 1:12 a.m. By the time she reached the airport perimeter, the rain had returned, fine mist clinging to her jacket. The chain-link fence surrounding the hangar sagged, half-cut, like someone had already been there. She slipped through, heart pounding, shoes echoing against the cracked concrete. Inside, the hangar was dark except for a single lamp flickering near the center. Beneath it stood a figure. Dad. He turned slowly, the light catching his face. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. His expression flickered between shock and pride. "You found it," he said quietly. Mia froze. "Why? Why disappear? Why make me think you were dead?" He took a step closer, the sound of rain tapping against the tin roof. "Because they would have killed you if I hadn't." Her pulse stumbled. "Who?" He hesitated, eyes scanning the shadows as though someone might be listening. "The people I worked for back then, before the crash. I was supposed to testify against them. I thought leaving was the only way to keep you and your mother safe." "You could have told us," she said, voice breaking. "I wanted to," he whispered. "But the moment I contacted you, they would have traced the call. I waited until the case was buried, until the ones who mattered were gone. And now," he stopped listening. Somewhere outside, a door slammed. Mia turned toward the sound, nerves tightening. "Now what?" Her father's jaw clenched. "Now they know I'm back." A pair of headlights cut across the cracks in the hangar door. Footsteps, voices muffled but urgent. Her father grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward a side exit. "There's no time. You have to go." "I'm not leaving you again," she hissed. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time she saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of 10 years of running. "You have your mother's stubbornness," he said softly, almost smiling. "But this time you have to trust me. If they find you, it starts all over." He pressed something into her palm, a small USB drive, sealed in plastic. "If anything happens to me, give this to the police. It has everything." "Dad, please." He pushed her toward the door. "Go." Mia stumbled into the rain, the wind tearing at her coat. She ran until her lungs burned, until the noise of the airport swallowed everything behind her. When she finally stopped, chest heaving, she looked back, just in time to see two dark SUVs screech to a halt outside the hangar. Then the lights inside went out. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. She gripped the USB in her hand, tears mixing with the rain. He had come back, but this time it might have cost him everything again. The rain wouldn't stop. It felt endless, soaking through Mia's jacket as she stumbled back toward the main road, clutching the USB drive like it was her heartbeat. Her mind raced with the last thing her father had said. "If anything happens to me, give this to the police." By the time she reached her apartment, dawn had begun to blur the skyline. Her hands shook as she slid the drive into her laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a folder appeared, labeled 417_logs. Inside were dozens of files, photos, scanned documents, bank statements, and one video file named Truth. She double-clicked. The screen flickered, and her father's face filled the frame. He looked tired, the same gray coat hanging loosely on his shoulders. He spoke softly, like he was talking directly to her. "Mia, if you're watching this, I guess I didn't make it back in time. There's no easy way to tell you this, but the crash of Flight 417 wasn't an accident. It was arranged. I found out the airline executives were covering up mechanical failures and falsifying safety records to protect their investors. They knew that flight wasn't safe. They sent it out anyway. Mia's breath hitched. I was supposed to testify. I had evidence. But when I refused to stay quiet, they made me disappear. I didn't board that plane. I made sure no one else could tie you to me. You were my reason for running. You were the only part of my life I couldn't risk losing. He paused, eyes flicking down as if fighting emotion. If this reaches you, take it to the authorities. Detective Randall can be trusted. He worked the original case before they pulled him off it. He's the only one who believed me. Tell him I kept my promise. I came back. The video ended abruptly. Mia sat frozen, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He'd saved her. All these years, she'd hated the silence, never realizing it was the wall that kept her alive. She grabbed her phone and called Randall. He answered on the first ring. Detective, it's Mia. I found something. The drive, it has proof. And I think my father's in danger. Where are you? At home. Stay there, he said sharply. Lock your doors. I'm on my way. But even as he spoke, a noise echoed from the hallway outside her apartment. The soft scrape of a shoe, slow and deliberate. Her stomach clenched. Detective, she whispered. Get somewhere safe. She ended the call and backed toward the kitchen, her heart pounding. The sound came again, closer. Then a knock. 3 slow taps. She hesitated, every instinct screaming to run. But something about the rhythm, the same pattern her father used when coming home from trips, made her falter. She took a step forward. Dad? She whispered. The door creaked open, and he stepped inside, drenched from the rain, bruised but breathing. For a moment, she couldn't move. Then she ran to him, throwing her arms around him like she had 10 years ago at the airport. He held her tightly, his voice rough. They found me, but I got out. I couldn't leave you again. Behind him, Randall appeared, gun drawn, scanning the hallway. We've got units en route. The drive's safe. Mia nodded, holding it up. Within the hour, officers filled the corridor. The men who'd hunted her father were caught trying to flee the old hangar. And within days, the documents went public. The truth about Flight 417 dominated headlines. A 10-year corporate cover-up exposed by a man who refused to stay silent and a daughter who never stopped believing he'd come back. Weeks later, as spring sunlight poured through the cafe window at Gate 23, Mia sat across from her father, their coffee untouched between them. Travelers hurried past, but this time, she wasn't watching for someone who'd left. She was sitting beside the one who'd returned. You kept your promise, she said quietly. He smiled faintly. So did you. Outside the glass, a plane lifted into the sky, its reflection gliding across their table. Mia touched her locket, the metal warm against her skin. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a weight. Felt like peace. As they stood to leave, a small girl tugged her mother's hand nearby, pointing toward the runway. Look, Mom. He came back. Mia smiled at the words, feeling them settle deep inside her. Because this time, it wasn't just a wish whispered under airport lights. It was a truth that had finally come home.